Hey everyone. Okay, let me go ahead and read through assignment number 2, and then I'll go into the Claritas website and kind of walk you through using their zip code lookup tool. I hope you find this assignment interesting. I find this part of rhetoric just absolutely fascinating. So here's the assignment for assignment number 2. This will be due on Sunday. Assignment 2 and 3 will both be due on Sunday, so really as soon as you want to get them done, that sounds great. But 2 and 3 will be due on Sunday the 29th. So for the second short writing assignment, you will identify an audience about whom you can invent. And remember, that term isn't used the way we tend to use it today, meaning with whom you can discover and identify some of the available means of persuasion. And spoiler alert, I'm thinking in particular about um, ways of persuading them related to ethos, pathos, and logos. So how can you start this process of invention? Like, how do you begin to understand your audience? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but one approach that tends to be fairly useful, at least that I've found, is to begin with some geodemographic data. So there's a company called Claritas, which is a geodemographic marketing firm, and they help other marketing advertising companies, politicians, media companies, I mean, you name it, pinpoint the backgrounds of their users uh, or their potential customers down to the zip codes and really even down to the specific neighborhoods in which they live. Um, Claritas has a free tool to show off some of what they offer on as a firm, which they call their zip code lookup tool. And look, they don't give you a lot, obviously, because it's the free thing, and they're just trying to show you, like, hey, you buy into this, and there's just a whole bunch more resolution that we can offer. But at the level of resolution that they give you, it's a tool that's going to help you identify a specific audience with whom you could possibly work for the next few weeks. Um, so I'd like you to use the Claritas zip code lookup tool to brainstorm an audience. And I would choose an audience that you already kind of know, but brainstorm an audience, brainstorm the available means of persuasion for that particular audience. So here's the prompt, and I'll bring up the Claritas tool in just a few minutes. After using the zip code lookup tool from Claritas, go into even more detail to describe the audience with whom you'd like to work for the next few weeks by describing their lifestyle. You know, Claritas is going to help you kind of focus in on an audience in terms of what kinds of cars and trucks they drive, what kinds of magazines and books they read, where they shop, what they watch on TV, and more. They're just going to give you a few bits and pieces. But ideally, you're going to pick an audience about whom you already know something. And so this tool is really just helping you kind of focus in on a way of thinking about audience that can be the basis for realizing how you might engage with them rhetorically. Okay? So once you've used the Claritas tool to look up a zip code that and choose one of the possible audiences from the 5 that they usually give you, and based on the kinds of things that that particular audience consumes, buys, reads, eats, drinks, etc., drives, then and then from your experience add even more to it. Based on that description, then identify a few of the proofs, which is another way of saying the supporting arguments that you could use in an argument. We haven't really focused on what a claim is yet, like what kind of a claim you could use. So you might think about that if it helps, but try to list at least one proof from each of the 3 modes of appeal, meaning from ethos, pathos, and logos. So, if you've got an audience in mind, like when I think about my hometown, and I think about the kinds of people who live in my hometown, and I use the Claritas tool to look things up, they're going to break my hometown down into 5 different audiences. And then I'm going to start to see in those descriptions of the 5 different kinds of audiences, like some of the people I already know from that town, like the kinds of people who live in that town and the neighborhoods that they probably live in. What else do I know about them? Like Claritas is just helping me focus in on lifestyle as a way of thinking of audience. Once I have that in mind, like What would be a good argument from ethos? What would be a good argument from pathos, from logos? And if it just seems too abstract, then pick a specific argument. Pick one, anything. You know, a local concern with that audience that because you know something about that audience. It could be political, could be religious, could be environmental, it could be municipal, it could be related to the schools, could be anything. Could be national, it could be regional. Think of a possible argument that they would be concerned with, and then build out some of the, invent some of the proofs that you think could potentially help support that kind of an argument. But the goal here is not about the claim, it's really about you just getting more practice with how ethos, pathos, and logos work. So let's take a look at Claritas really quickly. First of all, Claritas breaks up the country into 68 different quote-unquote audiences, or consumer groups. And you'll see that they've got clever names for them all. White picket fences, and then a brief description like middle skill, middle-aged family mix. Heartlanders, lower mid-skill, older, mostly without kids. 64 is family thrifts, low income, middle age, mostly without kids. The highest numbers are like the first one upper crust, like the lowest numbers are the wealthiest and the most mobile, and the higher the number, the less income, disposable income people have, and the less mobility people have in terms of that income. So, and by the way, college students, you all will show up in these, I think, or especially some of y'all who might be graduating next year or two and have friends who have just recently graduated, like you'll see that there are some of these represent you. So with that said, then you want to pick a zip code, and I've got a few in here. I grew up at 11030 and I live at 27612 right now. So like for example, if I put in 27612, which is in North Raleigh over by Shelley Lake, Claritas is going to give me 5 quote-unquote audiences, 5 consumer groups. And if you were paying for this, like, they're going to get it down to the neighborhood, like literally down to the block, like what people are consuming, what their lifestyles are, so you could like target them with, mailings, etc. But we're not using it for any of that. We're using it as a brainstorming tool to better understand what audience is in order to figure out how to invent some of the proofs that would be useful to support an argument. So knowing that the lower the number is more well-to-do, and the higher the number is, less well-to-do. I'm going to go ahead and pick Generation Web. Well, actually, yeah, why not? Generation Web, 48. And what Claritas will give you is just a snapshot of who is a part of that lifestyle. Give you a medium household income, urbanicity, description, income, product, assets, this kind of information. Some of this is useful. So you're talking about, high school graduates. They may or may not have college background. And lifestyle immediate traits. This is where I think things are really interesting. Nissan truck, eat at Starbucks, Finish Line, NBA, Facebook, Twitter, Motel 6, WWE, rhythmic contemporary hit radio. You should pick a zip code that you're familiar with and then ask yourself like, oh yeah, I kind of think I know who that kind of is in that zip code. And by the way, Claritas will help you see that like the people they're describing in the zip code that you know about, I mean, that kind of lifestyle, that kind of person, that kind of US citizen, they live all over the country in these areas. So you're not just talking about this particular area. This is an argument that could potentially go national, tweaked for local concerns, but like it's just interesting to realize how rhetoric can play into this kind of a focus. So using Claritas, you want to look up a zip code and then pick one of the 5 groups that they list, because they give you 5 with each zip code, and then they're not going to give you a huge amount of information. Like you might even laugh at some of these, like really, but use it as a jumping off point. Okay, yeah, I think that resembles some of the people I know in my hometown in that zip code. What else do I know about them? write it all down. And for what it's worth, I would pick an audience. Yeah, no, I was going to say something, doesn't matter. So for this assignment, use Claritas just as a brainstorming tool. It's not like going to give you what you really need. It's just a jumping off point. It's a diving board that you can spring off of to know how to focus in on what it might take to invent or identify a few of the proofs that could be the basis for supporting an argument that you would develop for this group of people. And remember, with ethos, you're looking at it's the hidden persuader. So if you don't resemble, if you don't talk and walk and look and sound like your audience, then it's not about pretending that you're someone you're not. It's about letting them know that you know who you are and how well you can engage through empathy, through care, through understanding, through knowledge about who they are and where they're coming from. Just people just feeling like you're slowing down and taking the time to really get to know where they're coming from. That's ethos too. And in terms of pathos and logos, if they're listing magazines, if they're listing restaurants, if they're listing cars, think about who drives those cars. Think about those restaurants and the themes and the experiences that are kind of designed within those kinds of franchise restaurants. Think about the kinds of stories or storylines that show up in the magazines and the TV shows and movies that might also get listed under some of these audiences. Like what is the range of emotion that this audience is kind of used to and willing to go toward. What do you think are some of the commonplace beliefs that they would have? If we're talking about an audience that we were just looking at without a college degree, high school and then right into the workforce, what kind of a life experience is that in terms of the commonplaces, the beliefs, in terms of logos that you could help use to develop an argument that would resemble the way in which they think through issues and so would appreciate where you're coming from. And by the way, that starts to fold into ethos too, because if you are presenting commonplaces to them that they recognize, they're going to feel like you kind of understand where they're coming from, and that can also double as an appeal to ethos. So I'll stop there. I hope that's enough of an explanation. Personally, I find this kind of data just absolutely fascinating. This is what I love about rhetoric. I think so much in the humanities, especially in English, tends to be focused on critique. It tends to be about analyzing what someone else has already done. There's not enough work like this, which is what rhetoric is all about when it's a practical art, which is getting to know people and then understanding how you can get them to think and feel and act in a way that's different from what they've been doing in order to go along with a goal that you have, a claim that you have for an argument. Yeah, all right. So if you all have any questions, of course, let me know. But otherwise, good luck.